What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we have Brian Walsby, and he is the dude that drew the cover for the Nardcore comp. He also did a bunch of classic art, he drew for 7 Seconds, he drew for the Melvins, drew for a bunch of people. And so we're going to talk about him doing that stuff, and then also he played drums in the band Scared Straight, and he played bands in some late 80s bands, and yeah, he's a total interesting dude, and so that is this week on the pod. If you would like to support the podcast, please like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please share with your friends. Let everyone know this pod is going on. We're still trying to gain traction, and so let everyone know. Please repost it on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you do. But mostly just tell your friends and your family and whoever would be interested in listening to this stuff. If you'd like to go the extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/185 miles south and become a monthly contributor. And those are my personal heroes. They donate a little bit of money every month, and they really help out the pod, keep it going. I could not do it without that because otherwise I would be losing money every month. And we're trying to keep this thing going. So, and I've been trying to do bonus episodes and all that, so I hope that the Patreons are enjoying that. Yeah, let's get on with the podcast. This is Brian Walsby.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
Hello.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Hey, Zach. How you doing?
I'm good. I got you live, unless you want to restart.
Okay. well, thanks for taking the interest and giving me a call.
Yeah,
It'll be nice. It'll be nice to talk to a human being during these weird times. So hopefully, spinning old stories will take everyone's minds off of the bizarreness of these current times.
yeah, I know. Everything is so weird out there right now, and I guess with you mentioning that, we should go full disclosure and say that we're recording this on March 18th, because by the time it airs, we might all be dead.
Man, that would be super cool. Our last words ever to the world, talking about whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's part of the reason of doing something like this is to get, primary source data on people.
Yeah, we all might be dead in 2 weeks. Who knows? But
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure I upload this thing and set it to auto air whenever it's scheduled. So even if
make sure you send it to Doug. Make sure you send it to Doug Moody.
Yeah, I know. He's been the real white whale of who I've been trying to get, and he turned it down because he said that Mystic has a podcast, and I tried to listen to their podcast, and it was just really a weird thing.
The Doug Moody thing is really strange because it's like even when all the people that you probably talked to that talked about Doug Moody and now you're talking to me, like, I don't know about anybody else, but we all just thought, or I did at least, I just thought, what exactly is this guy? Why is this guy so interested in, hanging out with people half his age and putting out, it just, like, what exactly is this guy getting out of it? I just remember thinking it was just really weird that we were meeting some weird older guy, but back then, like, if you're like 18 years old and you meet somebody that's like 25, that they might as well have been 90 years old.
Yeah, but he was probably okay. So if you were, what age were you in like 1984?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. Like 19.
Okay, and
maybe?
he was probably in his 50s.
I was like 18. I was like 18.
Okay,
I was like one of the slightly older guys, but I wasn't the oldest.
Okay, and then he would have been
the oldest guy.
And Doug Moody, like at that time, he was probably in his 50s.
maybe late 40s, early 50s, or something like that. So
yeah,
I just couldn't really figure it out. But he seemed nice enough. But the whole thing was just kind of weird. Anyway,
I think that he would explain it that he thinks that the punk of like the 80s was like a lot of like the blues musicians of like the 50s. Like you're kind of getting them in, or the R&B, and you're just getting them into the studio and kind of seeing what hits, right? And
yeah,
if you give them studio time, you basically have the rights to their records. And I mean that's what it is, right? So I don't know if it's total exploitation, because I don't know if any of that stuff really sold. But
it wasn't exploitation. Anybody that was asked to do a record did so, I'm sure, willingly. I know we did. Like we were. I think we all knew that it was not going to. Like we all were like, yeah, this is probably going to be kind of sketchy, but I don't know about anybody else, but we didn't have the ability to put out our own record or even learn how to do it. I don't think so. It was like it was like a free record for nothing, and I don't think any of us really thought too much beyond that. Like I think we all knew what the deal was. Like, and like a lot of the bands on Mystic, the production of all those records for the most part just weren't really very good, but it was still exciting. It was like, oh man, these weird, shady people in Hollywood want to have us record in their kind of crappy studio, but we didn't have anything to compare it to, so every moment of it was exciting. So and also I think that a lot of the bands that ended up being on Mystic, I don't think Scared Straight was going to be courted by SST Records or Danger House anytime soon. So like it's like, well, we should just do this. And at least that's my take on it. I don't know about a lot of the other people, but I remember most of the people were not very pleased about how things were done, and they're rightfully so. But I don't think any of us had any real high hopes for being treated fairly or whatever. I think we were just happy that we were going to have somebody put out a 9-song 7-inch with a Steppenwolf cover that half of which is faded away. So it was exciting.
Yeah, I mean, who else was going to put out the Rat Pack 7-inch?
Nobody. He's going to put out a Manifest Destiny 12-inch. Frontier.
That was pretty good, though.
No,
that one was pretty good.
I think the ones that probably I liked the most, at the time, they were kind of our mentors. So it was the Ill Repute, What Happens Next record, which I still think is a pretty good record. The RKL stuff, I think, even though that first record sounds god fucking awful, RKL were usually the best band from that, even though they were from Santa Barbara, they were, to me, live and stuff, they were like the best band. So I think like Materialize and stuff, they were like really good. And that Dr. No Plug in Jesus record, obviously, somebody must have been around to make sure that it sounded pretty good. So I would say those, and also the False Confession record I thought was pretty good too.
Yeah, the 7-inch.
Like, there was definitely, and all those guys were cool and everything, and we, kind of knew them, and we mainly knew the Ill Repute people. They, for whatever reason, they were the people that we knew. Like the Dr. No guys, they were like adults and kind of scared me actually, because they obviously drank and had sex and maybe did drugs and stuff. And I think the bass player, Ismail, was nice, and then the other guys were, I don't know, they were obviously the adults.
Sure.
The adults that maybe weren't positive, I guess, So,
well, they weren't a posse band. They weren't a posse band, so maybe they lived that angry lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny because like I moved away like in 1986, and you like the way I'm just like talking. I'm not even giving you a chance to ask. I should probably let you get a question. But I moved away in 1986, and it's like I just like all the stuff about Oxnard and Nardcore, and the fact that I drew that cover. There's a funny story behind that. It's just kind of interesting because like it's been so long, and like there's been all this activity that still goes on to this day, and a lot of it features some of those people that I kind of knew from back then. So that's cool. It's just kind of funny, It's like that stuff has, those punk rock records have a lot of legs on them, I guess. So that's cool.
Yeah, totally. What year or how old were you when you got into punk and hardcore?
I think like I was always into like rock music and stuff, and I think toward the end of the 70s and stuff, I instead of getting into like hardcore like around 80, I think it was like 81 when I finally started buying those records. But before that, I was kind of like I was into like rock music, and then like I went to high school in Simi Valley, and I met these like pretty enlightened new wave of British heavy metal kind of artistic metalhead weirdos that were in my art class in 10th grade. And it was them, and also the late photographer Naomi Peterson that took all these pictures for SST Records.
Sure.
The name. Well, she lived in Simi Valley, and she was like the only, and before punk rock, she was like the only punk rock person that was nice to me during that time. So it was like sort of like her and this 3 or 4 like new wave of British heavy metal guys, and they got me into like Motorhead, and somebody gave me the first Venom record and Angel Witch and the first 2 Iron Maiden records. I remember seeing Killers and just looking at it and just going, "There's just no way I'm not going to like this. I just have a feeling this is going to be great." And it was. It was the most incredible record at the time. And then right after that, 81 to 82, that's when, I think I bought Damaged by Black Flag in the early months of 1982, and that just completely blew my mind so much that I listened to the first side for like a month straight before I even got to the second side, which was twice as good. Like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how it sounded. It was just like, I just couldn't believe it. And through that, I just started, buying more records, and, I think by the end of 82, I was aware, or 82 to 83, I was aware of like Flipside and Maximum Rock and Roll, because Maximum Rock and Roll just came out, and I just started buying Flipside and Maximum Rock and Roll, and that was just like opening up this whole new dimension into this crazy world of just weirdos and all this other stuff. So I didn't drive. I didn't know how to drive until I was 30, which is pretty fucking hilarious now looking back. I was one of those guys.
It's awesome.
So when I was young, I would take a bus from Simi Valley through the Santa Susana Pass into San Fernando Valley, and just take a bus down to, there's like a couple of record stores in the valley that had punk rock records, and occasionally I would even go down to Hollywood and buy records down there, like off of Melrose.
Do you remember the name of the stores?
I want to say Vinyl Fetish, maybe, and I think there's the one called Slip Disc, but I'm not sure which was which.
Okay.
Like, I'm not sure about the location, and I could actually have some of that wrong, but I think Vinyl Fetish was the one on Melrose, and they had everything. So, like, if I read about the big boys and Flipside, I'd go down there. There was Lullabies Make the Brain Grow, an album. I was like, oh, it's $5. I'm going to buy that. Oh, there's the SSD Controls The Other Way record. There's the first Scream album. So I would just buy stuff based on maybe what I saw on Flipside. And Maximum Rock and Roll early on, but after a while you couldn't really trust what Maximum Rock and Roll said, because they would give Pivotal Records really bad reviews because they weren't, 1-2 FU kind of, the same thing.
Yeah, once they didn't like Agnostic Front, you're like, oh, I can't believe anything they said.
Not Agnostic Front, because I never really thought too much. I mean, they're okay, but more like Black Flag when they did the My War record, and Tim Yohannan. He was a nice guy. He was always really nice to me. He said something like, "This sounds like Iron Maiden impersonating Black Flag on a bad day," and it's like, man, this sounds not.
Nothing
Black
like
Flag, My War sounds nothing like Iron Maiden.
No.
It's like, there's absolutely nothing. They have nothing in common at all, unless you think that just because something isn't, 1-2 fuck you hardcore, then it all sounds the same. But but that was sort of how I learned about that stuff. And also Rodney Bingenheimer, listening to his radio show. Like, I'm sure plenty of people you talk to said the same thing. I'm going to be another one of those people that says Ronnie Bingenheimer was a Pied Piper. And oddly enough, before discovering Rodney, I used to listen to Dr. Demento, who was on the same night, Sunday night. And Dr. Demento would play like weird punk rock stuff because he thought it was funny. Like, I first heard the Ramones on Dr. Demento and things like that. So it was mainly from reading Flipside, Maximum Rock and Roll, and listening to Ronnie Bingenheimer and just sort of keeping my ears open. And I did that, and I wasn't even able to go to a punk rock show until the end of '83.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, at that point I started realizing that you could write to people, and I drew stuff, so I was like, well, I'm this weirdo that doesn't have any friends, so I can just write letters to people through the punk rock scene. And the underground heavy metal scene at the same time also, it was like sort of the same thing. It was very grassroots. And so I was like, well, I can draw, I can draw stuff. And so that's pretty much what I did. I would just like write letters to people and stuff. And I got stuff printed in some of these big fanzines before I actually went to a show. I just drew stuff imagining what I thought these shows must be like. So that's why everybody in those early drawings, everybody's happy and smiling and has the same haircut. And there's some long-haired metal guy there, and a couple of really badly drawn young ladies in the crowd that are always wearing hats or whatever. That's And then eventually I went to my first show, and it was nothing like what I drew, but it was kind of enough like it. And then I met Scott Rudensky. And Dennis and those guys, they had like well, you talked to Scott, right? So he told you, I think the history, but, they had a band that played at the local Simi Valley roller rink or something.
Okay.
And I went down there and I drew, and I was like, that's what I used to make friends. Like, hey, I can draw stuff. Look. And they were there, and I met Scott and Dennis, and I think they just graduated 9th grade or whatever, and they had their little band, Secure Our Future. And then I sort of ended up hitting it off with Scott. I mean, I liked all those guys, and I ended up joining Scared Straight when Scott took over as singer. And I liked all of them, but Scott was the guy in particular that I hung out with the most, and I think he liked. We just kind of got along really well, and he would always come over, and I was always getting mail and getting packages and badly mangled demos from all over the world and country, and he was into it, and we would just hang out and answer mail and listen to whatever, some Italian hardcore band or some badly mangled demo. We were really into it. It was really exciting. I look back and I can't really say that there was anything else I would have rather had been doing. It was a lot of fun, but it wasn't fun like, hey, we're getting fucked up, or we're gonna do this and do that. But it was exciting to be a part of that, And Scott basically drove my ass all over the place, and we had a few other friends, and we'd hop in his blue pickup truck, and he would drive us all over the place, and we'd see shows. And I owe Scott Rudensky a lot because he really sort of had no problem driving my non-driving ass all over the place, and we just it was cool. We saw all kinds of shows, and then eventually that led to them asking me to play, which was pretty exciting because I looked up to those guys and everything.
Yeah. I'll get there. I got it mapped a little bit. So let's talk about any standout shows you remember going to with Scott.
Oh yeah, well yeah, we went and saw Black Flag at Perkins Palace.
Okay, and do you remember the lineup at all?
Oh yeah, it was after the My War. It was during the My War period. It was like their first big show there, and I wasn't able to see them before that because like I said, I didn't really, I wasn't able to go to shows. I didn't really know anybody. So I would say 1984 in general was like the biggest year, I was trying to make up for last time. So like we saw DeCroizen at the Cafe de Grand. We went to the Cafe de Grand a lot. So we saw a lot of the same people there. Like the NoFX guys, we knew them somehow. We always saw those guys. The Justice League guys, we saw those guys. Ryan and what's his name? Mark. Well,
Yep.
Mark wasn't in the band. He was just like a friend first.
Yeah, and in the band later.
Kind of like my role. Yeah, he came in the band later. But we saw Septic Death, Condemned to Death from San Francisco. They were really good. That stands out in particular. We saw 7 Seconds at the Cafe de Grand. They were really good. Sam Hain, Jodie Foster's Army, Necros. A lot. We just tried to see Raw Power. We saw Raw Power, the Italian band, a few times. I think we went to see the 1984 Olympic Auditorium international show in 1984 when the Olympics came to Los Angeles, and the people that ran the city tried to clean it up. And then there was a show at we were always at the Cafe de Grand for whatever reason, because everybody played there. So we spent a lot of time there. So I would say, we saw BGK from Holland, I believe. I think that's where they're from. We saw a lot of stuff. And then, of course, we saw, we would start going to Oxnard, and we saw all those bands and stuff. And I think through that and writing letters, that's how I remember meeting, some of the people out there. But mainly it was over a few people.
Yeah, and so is there any punk rock art from you other than in the fanzines before you do the Nardcore comp?
Not really. I mean, I just drew so much stuff for people, but I didn't really hold on to anything.
Okay.
And I just dashed everything off. So I didn't really save anything. So every once in a while, people will ask if I have any of that stuff, and I don't. And what usually happens is people will send it to me now, so I can see just how much better I've gotten in a 35-year period.
Well, that's good.
I just dashed all that. Well, I was a fan, and writing letters and drawing stuff. That was sort of the backbone of all that stuff. You had the bands and the shows and stuff, and that was important. But all the people that networked, that was really important, and nobody ever really talks about that stuff as much as I think they should. So a lot of that artwork was just dashed off under those circumstances. And I didn't really save anything. I'm not really sure how much of it was worth saving. I drew for a long time, and then I relocated to North Carolina, and then I kind of started playing drums more, and I just got tired of drawing, punk rock, Unite the Scene cartoons, and times were changing, and I ended up just not drawing for a few years, and that was actually kind of terrible because I just, it didn't occur to me that I could try to draw something else, but I was just burned out, I guess. And then enough history had passed, and a few people that used to see my stuff. There's this guy, Chris Sherry, that you might know about. He's the artist guy that does all the Descendants stuff these days.
Sure.
Well, he called me out of the blue one day. This is pre-internet, pre-whatever, and he was like, "Hey, man, I was a big fan. What happened to you?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And it was that phone call, becoming friends with him, that made me decide to try to take things seriously and get back into it. And then that's when I improved, I guess. So the answer to the question, I didn't save anything. These days, it's a different story.
Sure. So how did it come about you getting asked to draw the Nardcore cover?
Okay. Well, through Scott, I think Scott was kind of a little bit tighter with Doug Moody than some of the other people that ended up recording.
I think he was too, because he mentions that he was actually the one that helped Doug move from Hollywood down to San Diego.
That's right. He moved him to San Diego, right after I moved away. It was, I think, through him, and I think one day I listened to an interview that that you did with him, and I think that his story is true. That's probably what happened. I think they just, hey, this guy draws. Do you want to draw the cover for Nardcore, mate? Or whatever. And I went, sure. So I drew something.
Yeah.
And it was in a heavy pencil.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole cover. It was that idea. But what happened was I gave him this super detailed, better looking thing. And what the cover basically is somebody tracing over that with a pen.
Yeah.
Because like the actual original artwork, I guess wouldn't reproduce the way it should. So whatever that cover is that ended up coming out was just somebody at Mystic drawing over my artwork, and that was what they used. And I didn't know that. So like when the record came out, I was like, here you go, mate. You know, he's British. Here you go, mate.
Yep.
Here's a few Nardcore covers for you, mate. And I looked at the cover and I was just mortified, but I was too embarrassed to say anything because obviously that was not what I gave him. But I was like, well, it's still a cover, you know?
Yeah.
I was just like, holy shit. These guys really dropped the fucking ball on this cover thing. But, you know, it was a free record. So.
Yeah, well, that's sacrilegious, right? If going over your stuff with a heavier pen.
Yeah, I love that story because it's like, you know, not like whatever I drew was so great, you know, initially, but, you know, it was better than what ended up being the cover. And I got to tell you, I've redrawn that cover, not just for Tony Cortez, but for a few, like I've redrawn the Nardcore cover about 10 fucking times.
Yeah, well, you just did it again for Fred for the It's Alive re-release thing.
Yeah, for Fred Hammer. Yeah, there's like, will you redraw this again? Sure. And then the 7 Seconds cover that I drew, I drew a cover for one of their records.
Yeah, but before you do the cover for the 7 Seconds record, you do the drawing on the insert for the Crew, also in '84, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's first.
Yeah, the Crew came first. I just gave that to Kevin, and I guess later I drew something that was supposed to be more serious, and I gave that to Kevin too.
And do you remember meeting him?
I wrote letters to him.
Okay.
I think I read a few scene reports in Maximum Rock and Roll, and I think I had heard the first record, and also I think
the 7-inch, the first 7-inch.
They were. What was that?
The first 7-inch.
Yeah, Skins, Brains, and Guts. But right. I think it was Committed for Life was the record I liked because it was like they were like the bands that, you know, there was Minor Threat, and then there were the bands that kind of sort of were influenced in some way by Minor Threat, but not completely. And I think that record in particular was a pretty good, you know, you could tell that they took a few cues from Minor Threat, you know, and
but they it's a solid spin though. They put enough of their own stuff on it. Those are great.
Oh yeah, I love for Committed for Life, and also it was kind of, you know, like it was kind of funny. I mean, like I've always had kind of a sarcastic sense of humor, I guess, but. Sure. I mean, it wasn't like I was making fun of it, but like, you know, some of the songs are just kind of funny. They're very scene-centric songs written with concerns for things that are very, you know, punk rock scene-centric. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, like songs about like Bottomless Pit, you know, in the pit, you can't be yourself. Yeah. You're an image of what's cool.
It's a lot of it's talking inward. It's talking inward to the scene. A lot of it. Yeah. Yeah,
it's very scene centric, and I thought it was great. You know, you know, so yeah, that's I just read them. I ended up meeting them later. I mean, I didn't really know them super well, you know, but I knew them well enough to where, you know, I hung out with them a few times, and you know, they were cool guys. You know.
So how did that feel though to get like, so the Nardcore, you do that and it gets botched and you feel a little weird about it, but how good does it feel to have one of your drawings like on the inside of that? That's a seminal hardcore record, The Crew.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. Yeah, no, I mean, no, it was cool. You know, yeah, there's nothing wrong with any of that at all. It was pretty exciting, you know. Of course, later, and I think those guys would agree. You know, later there were weird feeling. That's the other thing about punk rock. Like everything was done in the spirit of the times, and we're all really young. So like some stuff and the feelings behind, some of those things and situations were not handled super great. And I think I ended up getting resentful, over the 7 Seconds artwork, but that's just as much my fault, whatever.
In regards to that one or the next one that you do?
Oh, the cover.
The cover.
The Walk Together, Rock Together.
Yeah, because you do Together. You do the original art on the Walk Together, Rock Together LP. That
right.
later get like a year later, then they replace it with like it's like a photo, like a new wavy,
a pus head washed colored thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of dumb now. I mean, like everything's fine now. I but there was this very long period of time where I was, kind of a dick and sort of resentful and thought, I just gave it to him.
Well, it's water. It's water on the bridge now. So let's talk about it because I don't know the story and no one does. So you get asked to do the cover for a Walk Together.
Well, actually, after social media, I made sure people knew the story. And again, like I said, it wasn't. I would say it wasn't handled particularly well, but it's water under the bridge. We ended up talking a little bit through some emails, and I just was like, I don't want to be going into my 50s still giving a shit about artwork from 40 years ago, and some people are like that, so it's just like
But what actually happened? So you drew the cover.
I just gave him the artwork, and I just didn't really I didn't really specify. Well, here's the artwork. If this record becomes super popular and guys become giants of the punk rock world, I want to cut.
Sure.
And I think the BYO people, I've listened to enough interviews with those guys where like they didn't have there was some weird stuff. I think that happened between them too. So I think I was like sent like a couple of extra small T-shirts of one record, and that was kind of it. And that's oh my gosh, that was just a situation. I just I didn't really specify. Well, here's the artwork, but I'm going to be business savvy and ask for these things in case you guys become famous or whatever.
Right, but did they change the cover art because you were upset, or just because they wanted to?
Oh, I never knew.
Huh.
And I never asked. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay,
probably not.
Yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, it's water on the bridge now.
I kind of like both covers, but I like yours more, of course.
Thanks. So, well, that's some other cover I've redrawn a million times. So, and we actually, me and my friend Charles, that runs this company called Bifocal Media. We've been friends and worked together on these like T-shirts for a long time, and we actually I redrew that cover now, and we did a run of those, and those sold out instantly, and and the band was fine with us doing it, and whatever. So yeah, that's yeah, people like that cover for whatever reason, and it's still the same idea. Just people smiling and having a good time. So for whatever reason, that idea just seems to resonate.
Yeah, the other
more so than.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm bad with a phone thing. I like face to face more, but obviously you're a little far away, so we have to do the phone, and inevitably we're gonna step on each other a little bit.
Yeah, 3,000 miles away.
Yeah, so the other art that you do around the time is you do the second Psycho 7-inch, Boston band.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's 85 too, and that's pretty cool. Because again, like you're still living in California at the time, so this is a pretty rad Boston band picking up your stuff.
Yeah, I had a lot of pen pals. I had probably like 100 people, probably more people that I wrote to regularly. Just say, hey man. Hey, support your scene, dude. Hey, here's my band. Oh, cool. Here's a demo. Oh, here's a record. Hey, do you want to draw this? Sure. Like that. And those guys, the guys from Psycho were, I think the drummer, the guitar player were pen pals. And, one of many. So that's how that happened. They just kind of asked if I would do it.
Yeah. And then the other one I wrote down is for 86, you did the Skeezix. They're the Charlie Brown 7-inch.
Yeah,
And that's a German band.
And I don't even right, and I don't even remember that. But I drew a lot of Peanut stuff, and the Peanuts people were like big. I was really hugely influenced by Charles Schultz as a kid, and so I really liked Peanuts, and I don't know, all that stuff was a really big influence. That and Mad Magazine. So, and I do remember I used to draw Peanuts characters a lot back then. So I think whoever was in that band that wanted me to do it liked that stuff that I was doing. So, that's kind of how that happened.
Cool. I want to go back to Scared Straight a little bit. So
Okay.
they record the Nardcore songs first, and this is when Scott was the drummer and their singer like kind of is not around. So Scott, he plays drums and sings on the Nardcore songs. And then after that,
actually,
no, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I think, well, I could be wrong, but I think the drummer, because I ended up drawing something for I had met those guys at that point, knew them, so that I ended up drawing them when Scott was the singer. And there was a guy named Gary that was the singer before, and Scott played drums. I forgot Gary's last name.
Right. And so okay, go on. Sorry.
I guess, it's okay. I think, I want to say Gary wrote that, but I'm not sure. But I think he just didn't show up. And then Scott was like, I'll sing. So that was Scott's singing debut. And I think at the time there was this guy named James Harris that replaced Scott on drums. And he didn't last very long, but I'm pretty sure he's the guy that played drums on the 2 Nardcore songs. And there was another song that ended up on one of those We Got Party
We Got Power,
records, whatever.
We Got Power, We Got
We
Party.
Got This.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think he was on that song too, because like they're kind of excited sounding and a little rushed, and I think Scott was a little tighter.
Okay.
So I think that was James. I could be wrong, but then James didn't work out, and that's when they asked me.
So you come in and you do this.
Sure.
You come in and you do the 7-inch.
Right.
Do you remember anything about recording it at Mystic?
Sure. Well, I used Scott Williams. I used Scott's drums.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Radzinski's drums, and I remember we made a big deal out of putting new drum heads on it, and we just recorded those songs, and then the longest song was the Steppenwolf cover,
Sure.
And that was the most that sounded like, it wasn't our song, so it sounded like, oh, this is like a real song or whatever. I don't really remember too much about it. It was exciting, but it just seemed like we just went in there and did it, and that was it. And then what came out is what came out.
Yeah, and
so I don't.
And I'm just trying to understand like the timelines and stuff of how things were back then. Like, do you record and does it? It's 84. It comes out in 85, I believe. No, yeah, it comes out in 85.
Actually, you know what? I joined in the end of 84, 85, early, like I think February of 85 is when we recorded it, and then it came out like by the summer.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And how does it feel to like? It's the first piece of music that you're on. Does that feel rad?
Oh, it was really exciting. In some ways, Scared Straight. We were okay. We were kind of a competent band. Nothing really to, I mean, I think they got better as time went on. But I think for the time, I thought it was good. I mean, it was exciting because we were just these little kids, and we had a chance to record in the studio, and we got a chance to be on a record, and it was our record. And, so no matter what history says or the things about that were kind of, it was still pretty exciting. So, in some ways, that was the most exciting band I've ever been in, just because it was the first one. And it was a real short amount of time. I mean, I was only in the band for like 2 occasions, and neither of them were really very long. But back then it seemed like, time was seemed a lot longer. Like when you're younger, time seems to go by a lot slower. So
of course,
it seemed like a long time, but it was like, I would say I was in the band for less than a year. Then I came back and did like a tour with them at the end of 1985.
That's what I have. That's what I have lined up next for in '85. So in '85, you go on tour with you go on the Ill Repute tour.
Right. Well, no, '85 the summer is Ill Repute tour, and that went really well for the first 2 weeks, and then you've heard that story about everything in Pittsburgh, and all that's true. But that was a real pivotal moment because everybody went home, and I was like, well,
no, I know. So your story is great. So let's try to talk a little bit about that tour, just because I love to have everyone's paintbrush on it. So what do you remember about going on that tour? Like, first off, is this your first time like leaving home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and our parents all let us go, which is fucking crazy if you think about it. Things were a lot more lax, or just whatever. I don't know. They were just like, hey, we're going to go. We're 18. Some of us are 17. We're 17, 19 years old. I think the guitar player, Steve, was 21. And we were just like, we're going to go across the country. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
They let us go, which is, pretty fucking crazy if you think about it.
Yeah. And do you remember any sort of like preparation, or like you were just along as a drummer, so you're just loading up and going?
Yeah. Well, the tour was booked by the Ill Repute guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked us to play, and then it turned out that Carl didn't want to lose his job or something, so Scott ended up playing drums.
Right.
And doing double duty, and that it just seemed like it was very sudden. Like, oh, we get to go on tour. Okay, cool. And then we did. we just suddenly did, and it was the three Ill Repute guys and us, and then we had a couple of roadies. One of them was a guy from Australia that just showed up one day, like, hey, Brian Walsby, mate, we read about you in Maximum Rock and Roll. We came out to Simi Valley to see if there's any shows. Well, there's no shows out here, but come on in. And then one of the guys went home, and the other guy stayed, and he had a car, and we were like, you want to go with us? And he was like, sure. And then the day we left, the car broke down. It was a station wagon, and the adults of the tour, Jim and Tony, I guess maybe John, I'm not sure who, somebody that had a credit card, or at least, had some sort of semblance of adult activities. They rented a rental vehicle and came back. But we just went. We just left, and Hey, well,
sonically, do you remember how Ill Repute sounded with Scott playing? Because this is after What Happens Next, and Carl plays like such a crazy, like, loose style. I can't imagine like a straightforward drummer coming in and playing those What Happens Next songs.
He did the best he could.
Yeah.
Carl did have kind of a weird style, and I think Scott did the best he could, given the very short amount of time that him or anybody would have had to prepare for, doing that.
Yeah.
It was fun. I don't know why he didn't go, but I think it was probably a job thing. So he was probably the smartest person. But he had a real job. Having a real job probably was a big deal. Yeah, none of us knew that.
I think he still has the job. It's because he works for either the county or the city. He moved up to NorCal now, but he does something for, it's like government stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, he took it pretty seriously, obviously.
I know. So now he can probably retire soon at 55 or something.
The smartest man in the room.
Do you remember any standout shows from that tour?
Yeah, well, Ill Repute did okay. They weren't as good without Carl, but they were still pretty good. So that was always fun watching them. As far as Scared Straight, we played one show in Lincoln, Nebraska. That was really good. It was like really the height of that period where, like, people read Maximum Rock and Roll on Flipside, and people were into writing letters and trading stuff and trading tapes and this and that. And everybody was very connected through all that stuff. So we went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and it seemed like people came to see the show. They would see anybody, because everybody was young and excited. and it was pre-internet stuff, which is a really, it was a different world. It just was, so people were connected, but they weren't that connected. There was still some secrecy. Like there was, you know what I mean? Like you could show up and not really know local traditions and things that people in one part of the country would be like or do or dance like or dress like or whatever. People they didn't know everything.
Yeah.
So we, and anybody, if you were holding an instrument, chances are somebody would show up and watch you play. So we had this one show in Lincoln, Nebraska, and all these people came from like 4 different states in the Midwest just to see the show. And I was a minor punk rock celebrity because I drew stuff. And, we played really good that night. People were really into it. And I'd say that was the highlight of my experience with those guys. And I think everybody had a good time, in general. So I think that Lincoln, Nebraska was really good. Pittsburgh was good. We played in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That was good.
Did you buy a pair of pants?
What was that?
Did you buy a pair of pants? Isn't that Oshkosh? Isn't that a brand?
I think so. I lost my shoes. I bought sandals at some point.
I think they used to make the overalls.
Oh, okay, right. Well, I didn't have overalls, but maybe I should have.
Yeah.
It was very exciting being away from home for your first time, and most of the people were nice. It was just kind of crazy that our parents let us go, but we went. And then we had that harrowing experience in Pittsburgh, and that was really weird. But, everything still ended up being okay.
Yeah, so the story goes for the people that haven't listened to all the podcasts is Ill Repute and Scared Straight. They get to Pittsburgh, play a great show, and then afterwards you go back to wherever your crash pad is, and basically the van gets stolen with all the equipment.
That's right.
So,
and I found it.
Yeah.
I asked Scott for the keys. Hey, can I have? I think that's how it went. I think I heard one of those guys say that they went and saw it first. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But I have this idea that I was the first one to ask for the keys and went up the street. We parked in a really bad neighborhood. The promoter was a guy named Mike Lavella, who is still around. He lives in San Francisco, I think. But he was like the hot shot king of the scene in Pittsburgh at the time, and he was a nice guy, and we stayed at his house, and none of us really thought about sleeping in the van, and maybe people slept in the van at other stops, but I don't even remember that. But anyway, the point is nobody slept in the van that night, and that's the night when somebody just broke into the car and wired it or whatever, and just fucking drove off, and then the next day we're like, oh, it's gone. Which is kind of a weird thing, a weird reality.
Yes. Yeah.
For sure. So, so that was a very shattering experience, and we sort of sat around that day in a daze. So then the Pittsburgh Police Department, I think, called probably Tony, I guess. Like, we found it. We're like, yay! We went down there, and there it was. And we hit the U-Haul trailer, and it was very empty sounding. So they took everything. They took all the equipment. They took all of our personal clothes and whatever, all the exciting Doug Moody Mystic records that we were selling.
Yeah.
And right before that happened, though, we did pretty well. We were in the black, and the tour was making money. And again, it was that climate where anybody would show up. And then that was it. And then I think we tried to play one more show in Baltimore on borrowed equipment. And I do remember this. Ill Repute did horribly, and we actually did okay. But I think it was Ill Repute guys first, like, well, we're just going to go home. And I just couldn't really see the rest of us touring in Scott's blue pickup truck because, on the tour, a bunch of us were just driving in the back of this pickup truck, which again is kind of crazy. Like, I would never do that now.
Very of the time.
And, yeah, people just did it all the time. It's like, that's really dangerous. So I think Scott and Dennis were like, well, we can keep going. We'll just sit in the back of the pickup truck. It's like, but I already made plans to stay on the East Coast, and I'd like to think that I thought that it would be dangerous to do that and kind of stupid. And I was friends with the COC people at the time, and I called up the late Reed Mullen, recently deceased Reed Mullen.
Yeah, R.I.P.
And I was like, hey, yeah, that's very strange. And I was like, hey, I'm out here. And he was like, well, just stay put. In 2 days, we're going to come up to Baltimore and we're going to go see the Bad Brains reunion show in New York. So I was like, I think I'm just going to go with these guys and see what happens.
Hell yeah.
And then I went back and told those guys, and Scott was cool about it. And Dennis was, at the time, he was really upset with me. And, I don't blame that. But I just couldn't really see us trying to tour on borrowed gear, driving in Scott's blue pickup truck with 3 people sitting in the back, So that's sort of what happened. And then, so everybody went home, and I just stayed there at the promoter in Baltimore. This guy named Billy Stevenson, not Bill Stevenson. There was 2 Bill Stevensons, and he was the second one. He was a promoter at the time. So I just stayed in his house for a day or 2 and wondered what I was fucking doing. What am I fucking? I had nothing. I had no clothes, no possessions, and I think I had $200 at home, so I had my parents send it to me, which was like $1 million back then. But
Sure.
yeah, I was just sitting there going, I hope I'm doing the right thing. This is pretty weird. But that was like a very pivotal moment.
Of course. Of course. And so real quick.
That's how I ended up moving. But I could have easily just stayed home and just learned how to drive. But anyway.
Well, I want to get into all that. It's so awesome. Because there's no better excuse than to go see the Bad Brains in '85. Come on.
Yeah.
But what did your folks
like?
What did your folks say when you called them?
They were like, okay, well, they didn't really care what I did. I mean, okay. I don't mean that in a horrible way, but they were just like busy with their own lives and problems that, I was like the middle kid. It was just easy for me to go, well, I'm just going to do this. Okay. They're like, okay, we'll send you the money. And
cool.
Then I ended up staying on the East Coast for a month and a half and took a bus across the country at the end of the summer of '85. And,
I want to talk about the summer, but I have all these questions just about like how things like function back then, because I think it's very interesting. So do they have to send you the $200 in an envelope, or do you like Western Union?
I'm going to assume I asked somebody that was an adult how to do that. So I'm sure Western Union must have been how I got the money, because I just can't imagine me going, okay, well, what do? Do you just mail that money to me? Or,
Yeah.
So I'm sure it had to be Western Union.
Okay. And then do you take a bus down to New York to see the Bad Brains?
No, I waited up there, and the COC van picked me up, and I went with those guys.
Awesome. And you've been pen pals with them, but you hadn't met them yet.
I had met them. I was pen pals with them since the summer of '84. I officially met them in January of '85 when they came out and recorded the first side of the Animosity album. That was when I officially met them.
You were in the studio with them?
I was in the studio with them, not for that period, but when they did the first version of Technocracy.
Okay.
I think I'm on both versions, yelling stuff.
Okay.
On the record.
Yeah.
Like backup singing.
Yeah. How did you feel about Animosity when it came out? Did you know right then that it was going to be that influential?
It's their best record.
Well, it's one of the best records ever of any genre.
I still think so. The whole thing that happened to Reed's pretty bizarre. But that was a long time. Fortunately, that was a long time coming. I mean, he was a really nice guy, and he helped out a lot of people. And Animosity and the Reed I knew then, that was the person that, a very generous person at the peak of his powers. And, I still think that's a really good record. And, listening to it a whole bunch in recent times, hasn't really changed my opinion of it.
Totally.
Especially side 2, which is the weirdly produced side.
Yeah. So they pick you up and you go see Bad Brains. And do you remember?
Right.
Do you remember the club? Do they play CBs? No.
Not CBGBs. We ended up going back up there to see the Descendants because that was when they reformed and they went to CBGBs and played with this band Social Unrest.
Okay.
And the COC guys and Descendants really hit it off.
Okay.
That was the first time I met the Descendants people. And that was kind of a big thrill too. And they were really good. And I think they followed COC to Boston when COC played with the Offenders. This was all like this month-long period after the Scared Straight tour, where it was just like I went back to Raleigh and I would stay with various people and couch surf. And even during that time, like another band, this is also funny. I actually left to go on a week-long tour in that period with the band SNFU. They came through with this other band, the Rhythm Pigs.
Wow.
From El Paso that ended up moving to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And they were like, we know who you are, Brian Walsby. Why don't you come with us for like 5 days?
Yeah.
You'll meet up with COC at the show that we're playing with them in Baltimore. Okay, that sounds good. I have no possessions or money. I'll just go with you guys. Sure.
Awesome.
In the name of punk rock. So even during that time, I went with those guys. It was just really ridiculous.
And how good were they in 85?
What is that?
How good were they in 85? They had to be raging.
SNFU?
Yeah.
They were killer. They were like one of the best bands I'd ever seen. That was when they got that guy Dave Bacon to play bass. So it's basically the second album version of the band, which is sort of the best version, at least for that second. They were great. They were really nice guys, and they were the first Canadians I met. Canadians are, there's this something that's just slightly different for whatever reason. I never was able to put my foot on it or put my finger on it or whatever.
There's something genuine about them.
Yeah, there's
Canadians
not really
are
a lot
great
of pretense. There's no pretense.
Yeah.
And so they were great guys. And so it was a very exciting, so the tour was exciting. The adventures after the tour were also equally exciting. And when I ended up going back to Simi Valley, the rest of the guys in Scared Straight, they didn't hold it against me, and nobody was mad. They found this guy Tim Williams to play drums, and I just went back to hanging out with them, and I just ended up going everywhere with them at their other shows, and nobody was mad at me or anything. And then Tim couldn't go on that tour, so they were like, "Oh, do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yes." So that happened, and then afterwards. That was when I decided I was going to move to Raleigh, and they kept going.
So you went on the second Scared Straight tour as well?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that. So this is Scared Straight and NoFX?
Scared Straight and the Grim.
Scared Straight and the Grim.
Jordan Burns was the drummer. He let me use his nice drum set.
Okay. And
the Grim were terrible. Well, they weren't really terrible. They were just real slow. I mean, I think they were, Tim was the singer. Bob, that's the guitar player. He traveled separately. He was the smartest guy on that tour. Another adult doing adult things. And let's see, what else? Who else was in it? Yeah, and Jordan, and he was the drummer. And so we toured with them. I think Tim and Scott kind of worked on that tour together. And then that tour also meant that we'd meet up with Entropy, this band from LA, and NoFX. And we knew the NoFX guys, and the NoFX guys were nice guys, Mike and Eric. They were just awful. They were, not like Scared Straight was so great, but they were legitimately awful.
No, the first 2 7-inches are not good.
Yeah. Well, this, those guys were always nice. And, I just never would have guessed out of anybody back then that could have done what they achieved. I never would have guessed in a million years NoFX would be the band that would do that.
Well, if you watch RKL long enough, you're gonna get good. If you wanna try to top them.
Yeah, but like by the time they became famous, did they still sound like RKL? Isn't that when they sounded like Bad? When Bad Religion did that one record that everybody liked.
Yeah, they went a little more melodic RKL, but like in their transition time, if you listen to them on like
I mean, I wasn't here for any of that. So it's like all that stuff. Like to this day, I don't. Like there's some stuff associated with that world that I really like a lot, but it only was years later. Like I really like that band Propagandy. I think they're like a great band.
Of course.
But I don't like any of that early stuff. I just like the stuff like now going backwards a little bit. I don't, I just wasn't around for that stuff. I don't think I would have liked it, but I do like how they are now, and they're really nice people. But for the most part, I don't really know about any of that stuff, like Bad Religion or NoFX. I liked the first Bad Religion record, okay, when it came out.
I like all of it, and I especially like the 10-foot pole Rev LP. I love it.
Well, like I heard that record, and I was like, a lot of it may not have been my thing, but there's no denying that it's way better in every way than the Scared Straight
Well,
Seven.
Of course, it's awesome.
And there's a couple songs I really think are good. I think Paulie, like I think as they went on, I do legitimately think some of that stuff is good. And to me, it sounds kind of a little bit different than some of the other stuff.
It does. It's a little riffier, and also they do barely like any distortion on the guitar for like a very well produced album. So it's an interesting sound. It sounds like nothing that came before it or after it. And those are kind of the albums that stand out to me. Is when it's just like, how could you ever recreate this thing? Like it's almost like a fluke,
Sure.
So.
Sure.
I love it.
Sure. Yeah. But like I'm not as familiar with that world as I was with the world that we all came out of. But I'd say that pretty much everybody from back then that I remember, was a pretty nice person. It's just not something I wasn't around to be a part of, and I don't think I would have been a part of. But whatever.
Right.
All those people are really nice, and good for them.
Because you moved to North Carolina in 86 or 87?
86.
Okay. And what do you do with your life for the next couple years?
I grew up in public and didn't draw, and I played music in local bands mainly and worked in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. Hey, can you hold on one second?
Absolutely. Okay, so in 89, this is kind of pivotal to you, I think, because you do your first artwork for the Melvins.
Yeah.
And you do the Oven 7-inch.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Well, I met them. I moved to North Carolina, and I think literally 2 months later, the Melvins came through touring with RKL, which is kind of funny.
It's awesome.
This is 86, summer of 86, and they played. And I think I had read about the Melvins and Maximum Rock and Roll, oddly enough. And, they were right up my alley, and they were instantly nice people. And I just became friends with them. And one thing led to another, and that just led to me drawing that cover for whatever reason.
Yeah, and starting a lifelong friendship and partnership, because you tour with them to this day.
Yeah, I've spent the last 10 years working for them. I sell merchandise, so it was very fortunate that I met those guys at the time, and I've been friends with them ever since. And I guess 10 years ago, that's when there was an opportunity to do that, and I've done that ever since. So it was pretty fortunate. It's not going to last forever. Every year that goes by, I always think, well, this has to be it, and somehow it keeps going.
Well, they're a band that you gotta hope never breaks up, because they're timeless.
Yeah. Well, people, a lot of the people that go to see them are pretty loyal, but also, a lot of times the people, when you get to be like 35 years old, a lot of people just sort of stop going to shows and do other things like raise a family or have kids or, just don't want to go to shows anymore. And I'm certainly, I became one of those people too. But the weird thing about them is that there's always somebody that shows up and replaces them, some younger people. So,
yeah,
it's not like the people that see them are all people my age or the band's age, So
no, and it's timeless music. It's not necessarily just for young people, so it spans.
Yeah,
it's definitely
not.
Ages.
It's definitely not youth crew, straight edge, hardcore, or whatever. And those guys have had as much punk rock history as anybody. They have as much punk rock history as Mike from NoFX or whoever. So.
Sure. In '89, then also you do two bands. You do Snake Nation, and you do
yes.
I don't know how to pronounce it. A Wax with two W's.
Yeah, Wax.
Okay.
Wax was with the guy that ended up forming Merge Records and was in the band Superchunk, Mac McCon. Mm-hmm. And then Snake Nation was like Mike Dean and Woody Leatherman playing without Reed, and they asked me to play because of whatever reason, and it was half old COC songs that were never recorded, and then stuff that everybody made up really quickly.
Yeah, but both those bands are really cool. I think the Snake Nation is very like if people like the first Blast record.
I love the first Blast record.
Yeah, they could really get down with that Snake Nation. It's cool.
Well, it's kind of funny you say that because there's definitely a few moments there where I was trying to rip off Bill, and I know that the COC guys liked the Blast guys very much, and yeah, well, that's cool, man. I mean, the Snake Nation record, it's a little, I don't know, it's a little, I don't want to say disappointing. I just kind of wish it sounded a little bit better, but I've heard that's probably the one thing that I was lucky enough to be a part of that I've heard the most from people over the years, because I know some people really like that record. I don't really think that Mike and Woody think too much of it either, but I'm sure they've had to hear people tell them that they like it too. I think I might like it the most out of the three of us.
Yeah, and circling back,
it was definitely a thrill to play with those guys.
Yeah. Circling back to straight edge hardcore, you're on Caroline the year after Youth of Today, so that's kind of cool.
That's right. Yeah, they gave us like $6,000, and we pocketed half of it, so we each got $1,000, and then we spent $3,000 going to some guy that Woody knew that had no experience recording that music, and I remember me and Mike Dean, I clearly remember this, we were worried about whether or not this guy, he was a nice guy, it's that same story of, hey, we're going to record this stuff with somebody that we don't think understands where we're coming from, man.
Yeah.
So we I think we made a cassette of Black Flag Slipping In, like a song from that, and then a song from the first Black Sabbath record, and then maybe a song from the first Melvins record, Gluey Porch Treatments. I think and we gave it to him, and it was just it was totally pointless. Halfway through the recording, he kind of said to us, "Oh, I think I totally know what you guys are going for now." And we're like, "Oh yeah, what's that?" And he said that he thought we sounded like Foghat. No, I'm not trying to sound like Foghat.
No, you're supposed to say power of expression. Come on.
Now we're trying to sound like, Nightmare and Our Explanation.
Yeah.
Those prolonged break-in breaks.
Yeah.
No, but it was fun. I just wish it sounded better. But, it's there for history, and people have been very nice to me about that record over the years.
Are you singing on it as well?
I sing on one song.
Okay.
You can call it that.
Okay. And then
I think it's called "I Will Never Shake You."
Okay.
It's terrible. Like a lot of people in punk rock, since people can't really sing for the most part, that whole thing of, well, I guess I'll do it.
Sure.
Like somebody that isn't really a singer that can't sing.
Sure.
Somebody has to always do that. But in Snake Nation, there were 3 people that can do it. And I think Mike did mushrooms at the time in the studio, and we I don't know what happened. It was just like, it was what it was. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. All right. So jumping way ahead in '09, Tony Cortez does another Nardcore comp, and he reaches out to you to draw the cover. So you're able to get some redemption and not have someone trace over your stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, he said, "I'll give you $150." That's probably what he said. And I went, "Okay, sure, I'll do it." Because Tony was always a really nice guy, and I'm sure he still is a nice guy. So
Tony rules.
There was no problem.
The mayor of Oxnard.
Tony's really nice. Oh yeah, I'm sure. He's always been a very nice person, and so I had no problem redrawing whatever he wanted for that amount of money. So
yeah, and it's cool.
And
Although
I think
the depiction of me is very ugly.
I'm sorry,
but that's okay. I look way better on the when you do like the Nardfest art. I think I just look I look more handsome in a hat.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. Well, I think I also redeemed myself now that I know who you are over these years. Like, I think that insert thing I gave you is like probably ended up being the best looking thing that I've drawn in that style. Like, oh, well, I'm glad that happened. Like, oh, this looks pretty good, and I think you look pretty good. Hopefully,
no, I think it looks great. We haven't talked about that. The people don't know that you did a drawing in basically the apex of your career is doing a drawing for the fourth Retaliate LP.
That's
right. that's what it's all about. So no,
sure.
I mean that was so fun to get you in, and just so people know, you never know how people are going to act when you reach out to them blindly, but you're so approachable, and I think it comes from your lifetime of writing letters, right? And running into people that are either friendly or not friendly, and you decide to be a certain way because you know how people want, how you want to be treated.
Sure. Well, it's also like if somebody comes up to you and they like something that you did, regardless of what you think about it, it's like nobody has to be nice to you. Nobody has to pay you a compliment. Nobody has to want to pay you money to do something for them. Nobody has to give a shit. So the fact that people give a shit is a nice thing. So you should, you should always be nice to people because, nobody has to be nice. Nobody has to do anything for you. So if people like something that you did, how can that be a bad thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the long and short of it is that if anyone wants to reach out to you to do something, just do it. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Brian?
Well, my email address for the people that want to spell it out is reluctantking@hotmail.com. I'm also one of those people that I have a website that I don't do a whole lot with, but I sell stuff through it, and that's brianwalsby.net. And I'm one of those idiots that's on social media like most of the world, and I just go under my name, Brian Walsby, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and you can reach me through either of those. And the Instagram stuff seems to be kind of picking up a little bit since Facebook goes through these periods of just, why am I even doing this anymore? This is depressing.
Yeah. But you're pretty prolific on there. You're posting stuff all the time. It's pretty cool. And then also on the brianwalsby.net, you do have a store. So for fans of his art, like for instance, my friend Micah got me, like, you did a Scared Straight shirt. You put out the art on a shirt, and it's like, oh, this is awesome. Like, it's like, man, I really wish I could get a Scared Straight shirt. Well, here's a guy that has it on his website. So you should.
Yeah, that was just like, Charles was like, well, maybe you should do that. And it was like, a chance to redraw something that maybe I wasn't very good at drawing at the time. And that Scared Straight record is certainly up there with something that, well, yeah, I could, it's kind of not fair in a way. It's like, because it doesn't look really the same, but it's like, man,
you can tell what it is.
Some of that stuff just looks, it's what it is, but it's like, man, the Nardcore cover and the Walk Together, in the Scared Straight. It's like, man, if I can redraw that and somebody's willing to buy it, I should just do it.
Absolutely.
So thank you for getting that shirt, or your friend for buying it for you.
Yeah, shout out Micah Wolf, the man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, dude. So, and thanks so much for doing this, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry for like kind of rushing you toward the end here, but I definitely appreciate it. I've always, I still talk to Scott. We're still in touch, and I kind of talked to Dennis a little bit, and I saw Steve Carnan on the last Melbourne tour, which is crazy. Haven't seen him in 30 years, and whatever the older people that remember me from back then have always been nothing but nice to me, and I definitely appreciate that. So it's kind of cool to talk about some of that stuff with somebody that's interested. So I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been well represented
With this interview?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. I just gotta make sure.
I got to tell the Nardcore cover story, which is that's a great story for sure.
Absolutely.
Being handed this horribly recreated, here you go, mate. The thing about Doug Moody was the joke was that he would pay you in pizza slices. Here you go, mate. Look at some nice slice of cheese pizza.
Yeah.
For drawing the Nardcore cover. Like, sure, Doug, sounds great.
Yeah, I gotta get him.
Cold.
I gotta get him. He's because you've talked to him before, so But like for all the people that haven't heard him talk, he's just a guy with the gift of gab. Like he will go and go and go.
I mean, I just remember he had an English accent, and I just thought it was really weird and a little creepy that he hung out with lots of young men in Hollywood.
Well, everyone's got their thing. But no judgment from me.
There's probably nothing more to it than that. But looking back, it's like that's kind of weird. But maybe it's not.
Hey, he wanted punk rock to make it, dude. And someone had to put out that Rat Pack 7-inch.
Yeah, the sound of young America. We'll put out the Manifest Destiny Rat Pack record, and we'll put we'll put out that Habeas Corpus box set.
That's the one thing that never came out is the Habeas Corpus 7-inch. But
I don't know why everybody else came out. I know. I was waiting.
What are you gonna do? Anyway, thanks so much for your time, Brian.
Oh yeah, no problem, Zach. Thank you for calling me. I appreciate it.
All right, much appreciated. Goodbye.